So for these last few weeks, we have been dealing with this particular book that is by Joseph Daniels Jr. It's called Walking with Nehemiah. Your community is your congregation. And over the last few weeks, we have been dealing with the breakdown of Nehemiah. The first week we dealt with Feel Your Heart Break. That was Nehemiah 1 through 4. Nehemiah gets word that his community, the wall in his community has been torn down. And the Bible says that he cries for a season. And we talk about the things that will make your heart break, whether it's family, church, community, schools, whatever the issue may be, that sometimes in life issues happen that your heart breaks for. And that's the first section that we dealt with. But then on the second section, we talked about pray for next steps. That the reality is that after things happen, you have to pray for what's next. How do you move on from this? How do you go to your next destination? And we talk about how important prayer is. That is verse 5 through 11 in the first chapter. Then on that following week, we kept the momentum going. And that chapter we dealt with, give it your all. Verses 10 and 11 on the same chapter 1, how Nehemiah, after he's prayed and had conversation with God, and after he's lamented about what's going on and reminding God that he has also told them that if things happen and that he was going to do certain things, then the 10th and 11th verse, he says that not only do I ask favor from you, but I want favor from the man I'm serving. He says, I am a cupbearer to a king. And the reality is that if the king did not find favor in him, the king could have killed him. The king could have told him no. The king have done a lot of things. But then it talked about give it your all. In the very next chapter, 4th chapter of this book, it says, take the risk. Nehemiah, not only do he pray about this to God, the Bible tells us in the 2nd chapter, 1 through 9, that he goes up to the king and he's serving him wine, but the king noticed that he is visibly sad. We talked about how it is that sometimes you try to smile during hard situations. That many of us have to go through storms. We've had to work. We've had to go to church. We've had to deal with things while we're married. We have to deal with a lot of stuff and still try to keep a smile on our faces. But sometimes things can be so egregious that you cannot continue to smile. The king says to Nehemiah, why do you look so sad? And Nehemiah responds, saying to the king, how can I not be sad when my community has been destroyed? My ancestors' land has laid to waste. How can I not be sad? And the king replied, so what do you request of me? And Nehemiah makes his request, saying to the king, please grant me favor so I can leave. And not only do I need to leave, I need a letter to give me safe passage. The king not only gives him a leave of absence, not only gives him a letter, but he also gives him an army to go with him. Because the reality is not only do you need a letter, you need provision for when things come after you. And then what we left off at was inspect the mission field. After Nehemiah gets to the land where he needs to go, the 10th through the 15th verse tells us that Nehemiah goes in the middle of the night to inspect the wall that had been torn down, to find the areas where they needed to spend the most time at. So here we are. We have this in our text for today. We're going to go with this. And the chapter it's talking about is gain commitment. Verses 17 and 18. So hear the word of the Lord. I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible. So hear the word of the Lord. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins when its gates burn. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jericho, so that we may no longer suffer disgrace. I love how this text is set up. This directly comes from the book. I love what Joseph Daniels says about this particular chapter. He says, when our actions is rooted in our heart's break for, when we pray for God's next steps, when we're all in, we take risks and we take the time to inspect the mission field, we soon discover that gaining the commitment of others is possible and necessary. This is partially true when we are prayerful and strategic about it. Before Nehemiah surveyed the situation, he saw himself as one of the community. This enabled him to speak the truth and summon the people to rise up. I've learned in my time of living is that you cannot do everything on your own. At our church at Griffin Chapel, in our sanctuary sits about 300 chairs. I got to Griffin in 2021, and when I got there, we were just coming back into the sanctuary from COVID, and we were having pull-up service where people were able to pull up to the service, and the preacher before me was preaching outside. So we were just coming back into the church, but we wanted to slow walk it. So we moved about 200, maybe 250 chairs, and we only allowed 50 in the sanctuary, and then we moved it up to 100. And we were having discussions about when are we going to move the chairs, and things were taking a little bit more time than I thought it should. So I just decided to go ahead and move all of the chairs myself. The problem is we didn't have any storage space upstairs. So I had to move about 200, maybe 250 chairs up and down the stairs. Found myself tired, and I thought that, hey, I can do this. I don't need nobody. So I'm working there by myself. Nobody is there. And one day while I'm carrying 3 or 4 chairs at a time, I'm trying to rush and get it done because I had other stuff I needed to do. I found myself tumbling coming down those stairs. Hurt myself pretty bad, but nobody was there. I told this story while I was in service one Sunday morning, and after service, one of the men told me, now, Pastor, you don't have to do it alone. And the reality is that we cannot do ministry alone. We can find ways to do things in some places, but we have to work together. The Bible tells us that when Moses and those that were with him were fighting a battle, that as he lifted his hand, they won the war. But when he grew tired, his hands came down, they started to lose the war. But Aaron and Hur on both sides of him helped him lift his hands so that he can continue and they can continue to win the war. The songwriter says it best, and I love the way it says it. The Winans has a song that says, together we stand, divided we fall. Nehemiah knows that in order to rebuild this wall, he needed some help. He needed some help to get through this journey. And he constantly says this, and I want to show us this in the 17th and the 18th verse. He says this. I love the way he ends the text on the back end of the text. It says, come, let us. He made them feel a part so that they understand that it's not just on him. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem so that we may no longer suffer disgrace. I told them that the hand of God had been gracious upon me, and also the words that the king has spoken to me. Then they said, let us start building. He gave them examples of who had been sent, who had sent him. And he said to them that the king has granted me favor so that I can help build this wall and so that we can continue to do the work in our community. Sometimes when things fall down, you need others to help lift you up. And many of you can testify that I've had some trials and tribulations. I've had some issues happen in my own life. I've had some circumstances that I needed others to help me get up. I can't do this by myself. I had a member that was telling me, said, Pastor, I was at home and I failed and it was hard. I had nobody around, but what I did realize, I had a life alert that I was able to push a button and they sent somebody out to help me. Sometimes you got to have somebody there to help you up. Yes, in life, sometimes you do things by yourself. Yes, there are times where only you can take care of those things. But the reality is that when we work together, we can get a lot done. I love this. It says this in the book. I love this. It says, when we serve those for whom our heart breaks, when we pray for God's next step, when we all take risks and take the time to inspect our mission fields, we discover that gaining commitment of others is possible and necessary. Particularly when we are prayerful and strategic about it. Before Nehemiah surveyed the situation, he saw himself as one of the community that's enabled him to speak the truth and summon the people to rise up. We have to realize that we cannot do this by ourselves. We have to have others around us to help us through this journey. And you never know where your help may come from. I heard the story one time of this pastor who was on a plane. He was on the plane, and the plane, it felt as if the plane had dropped 1,000 feet. All of a sudden, people that didn't have their seatbelts on, they felt the turbulence and they looked like they were floating in the air. People bounced back in their seat. They were all frustrated to the point that when they got off the plane, many of them voiced their concerns to the pilot. The pilot had tears in their eyes as every last one of them complained and complained and complained. And this preacher said that when he got home, he looked on the news to find out what happened. What happened was that another plane did not listen to the traffic controls to the point that they almost rammed each other. So this plane had to drop 1,000 feet so that these two planes would not connect. And the reality is that sometimes God's grace and mercy covers us and protects us and sends people along with us to help us that we do not know. We don't always know the reasons. We don't always know the situation. We don't always know the circumstances. But can you testify that you didn't get here by yourself? The old song used to say, somebody prayed for me. Somebody had me on their mind, took the time to pray for me. And many of you are the examples of other people praying for you. I love this chapter. I love this chapter in this book. It's so good. There's 3 points, and I'm going to take my time to deal with this. Number one is know their self-interest. That's number one, know their self-interest. Number two, wait to speak until the time is right. And number three, get folks in the community to see you as one of them. Okay? Know their self-interest. Talked about it before, is that you cannot do ministry in your communities, in your church, in your schools. You cannot do ministry with those around them if you don't have the same self-interest. You may think a little different. You may have some ideas that are out of the box, but you have to have some people that have the same self-interest so you can have buy-in power. I was working on a plan to try to get some stuff together, and over the last few years, we have done a wonderful job with partnering with First Methodist to do a trunk or treat. We realized that we were doing one and at Griffin, and First Methodist was doing one as well. So we decided to work together. And we realized that if we work together, we can reach more people. Isn't that amazing? That if we work together, if we pull our resources together, if we find our self-interest, we can do more work than even possible. We knew we wanted to give back to the community, so we partnered with Church of Resurrection so that we can give and feed those in the community. We partnered with the organization NAACP so that we can give water to those that were struggling in Amory and other places when the tornadoes happened. And as being a part of the United Methodist Church with our apportionments, we all partnered so that we can continue to do the work that God has called us to do. When we know our self-interest, we can do what God has called us to do. It's not what you do just on Sunday morning. How are you loving on people Monday through Friday? How are you loving on people on Saturday? Not just on Sunday morning, but loving on people throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout our lives. No. Our self-interest. Number two, wait to speak until the time is right. God will give you the right time to say certain things. God will give you when you've inspected the mission field, when you've seen everything that's going on around. God will give you an opportunity to speak. Nehemiah, the 17th and the 18th verse, Nehemiah is telling them what God has called for him to do, but he invites them by saying, let us rebuild the wall so that we can do the work. He invites them, and he also tells them that, hey, I was sent, that I got permission from the king so that I can come so that we can do the work. I'm sure many of you have a powerful voice in your community, have a powerful voice in your church, have a powerful voice at your job. Use that voice. Don't allow anyone to tear you down. Understanding what God has for you, it is for you. And your voice might be something that can invite those to church. Your voice may be a calming voice for somebody that may be going through a storm in your church, in your community, in your family. Use your voice. My favorite TV show out of all those shows. I told you, my cousin said I can preach, but I can't find a tune in a bucket. But my favorite show out of all the shows, out of American Idol and all these other shows, my favorite show is The Voice. Because it's not based off of looks. It's not based off of height. It's not based off of race. It's based off of a sound. That when the judges hear the right sound, they hit their button and they turn around and they see that person for the very first time. When we speak at the right time, God will elevate your voice so that people can buy in and people can walk alongside you throughout this journey. And number 3, get folks in the community to see you as one of them. I've learned this as a pastor in my short time of pastoring, almost 10 years now, that the reality is that if you don't have people that see you one of them, you're going to be as an outsider And in ministry, we have to be able to work together. Love on people and care for people, not seeing as if you're better than anybody. And many of us cannot do ministry because we feel as if we are better than other people. The truth be told, many of us are on one paycheck from being on the street ourselves. We're one situation from the doctor giving up on us. We're one circumstance from throwing in the towel, but thanks be to God. God has given us grace and favor all. It's been God's grace and his mercy. 17th verse, let's remind us that in the 17th verse, he says to them, come, let us rebuild the wall so that we may no longer suffer disgrace. He used us and we to show them I'm one of you. And even though I was at the king's palace, I still felt the issue. My grandmother used to always tell me all the time that when you leave this house, you are one of us. That don't shame my name. Don't shame your grandparents' name. Don't shame your great-grandparents. Don't shame those that came before you. So we are all examples of God's kingdom, that no matter where we are and who we are around, that we are this example. So he makes himself one of them. Says that know their self-interest. Number 2, wait to speak until the time is right. Number 3, get folks in the community to see you as one of them. And last one, and I'm done for the day, is to share the simple truth of the matter. Nehemiah shares this simple truth to them, letting them know that we got to rebuild this wall together. He shared the simple truth that my job here is to help us rebuild a wall so that we can no longer suffer disgrace. We can no longer hold our heads down because of what happened in our past. We are right here and right now. And if you are a member of First Methodist, you're a member of Griffin, you're a member of another church you're watching, you have to understand the work starts now. Our job is to help build our church. Yes, things have happened and people have walked away and have had issues, but if God is for you, who can be against you? You have to do the work now. The work starts now. Yes, the wall has come down. Nehemiah could continue to lament. He can go back home and just hug people and reflect over what used to have been 30, 40, 50, hundreds of years before. But he sees that the wall is down. He inspects the mission field and he starts to gain commitment because he's letting them know that the time is right now for us to rebuild. That's our simple theme at Griffin. Our simple theme is the year to rebuild 2.0, because we have to understand that no matter what used to have been, we are here right now. We stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. They have labored and they have worked. So now that we are here, we have to rebuild. Yes, it used to be 200, 300, 400, 500, 600 in your church. Yes, every seat used to be packed, but we're here now. And where we are right now, we have to rebuild. We have to do the work that God has called us to do. Let's say that together. Let us rebuild. Let us rebuild. Let us rebuild the wall. Let us rebuild those things so that we can do the work God has called us to. And not only let us rebuild, let's rebuild it better. Let's rebuild it better. Because sometimes walls have to come down so that you can realize I wasn't as nice as I should have been. I wasn't as caring as I should have been. I didn't even know my neighbor. I didn't know the people around us. And because the wall has come down, because the seats are not as filled, now I can respect the person and look at the person and love on the person. And now we can do the work, but we can do it better now. Now that we know each other, now that we're working together, because we realize all things work together for the good of them that love the Lord. If we know our purpose and we know what God has called for us to do, then we have to gain the commitment. Know that we cannot do it ourselves. Sometimes you'll get tempted to say, I can do it myself. But if we work together, yes, you can go on that roof and rebuild that roof, but somebody has to hold that ladder just in case you fall. Yes, there are times you can do things by yourself, but it's better when we work together. And if we work together, we can do what God has called us to do. I pray that this has been a blessing to you as it's been a blessing to me. And then I pray that this word has helped you. So God bless you, and I'll see you next time.